Hello, this is Ralph K. Ginorio. Give me a few minutes and I'll suggest an idea worth considering. We Americans, in our hearts, casually assume that everyone around the world is just an American in funny clothing with an odd-sounding name. We assume that when you get right down to it, history, culture, language, religion, none of that matters because we're all good people under the skin. What an idealistic way of looking at life. If only it were true. But it's not. Culture and civilization and history matter. They shape the world we're born into in indelible ways. For example, we value compromise. We honor the peacemaker. We assume that a person is reasonable when they are giving a little to get a little, going along to get along. And as long as we're not compromising core principles, we admire somebody who's willing to live with less than all that they could possibly want in order to live in peace with their neighbor. Now, this tradition of tolerance is what gives us a loyal opposition. I'm not happy that President Obama's in office. I wasn't happy with Presidents Clinton or Carter either. But I never became disloyal to the Constitution, to the flag, or to the office of the president. I respect the office of the president, and like him or not, agree with him or not, Barack Obama is my president, at least for a while. Until the election, until the inauguration. We'll see after that. But I'm a loyal American, whoever wins. I was happy when Reagan won. I was happy when Bush the elder and Bush the younger won. I'll be happy if Romney wins, because I'm a conservative Republican. But in power, I would never want to gather my enemies, my political opponents, up against a wall and fill them full of lead in order to prevent them from being a loyal opposition organizing to get my guy out of power. In the United States, we actually practice tolerance. Our republic works because, win or lose, we practice the English virtue of good sportsmanship. But these traditions do not come to us from Christianity. They don't come to us from those parts of our heritage which originate in the Middle East or the ancient Near East. They come from England. They come from the Roman Republic. They come from Athenian democracy. They come from the classical Greco-Roman humanism that says that the individual and that individual creativity that we each are capable of is something special, is something almost holy, is something that we should never be forced to compromise, at least not lightly. So the traditions of political tolerance that allow not only freedom, but a genuine give and take, a genuine negotiated peace between two sides that still don't really disagree, is something that comes to us from our traditions in Europe. Our Christian heritage comes from the Jewish, as does the Islamic faith come from the Jewish heritage, a Middle Eastern cultural context. And let's talk about that context. You have the moment at Masada where the Zealots are about to be conquered by the Romans in the early 70s AD. They've fought the Romans and lost across Israel, in Jerusalem, and now the surviving men, women, and children are atop this mesa-like fortress. The Roman army is below. For the last few years, they built a giant ramp with a gate and a bridge ready to top the walls. And the night before the Roman commander orders the attack, the zealot leader gathers together the men, women, and children on Masada and says, we could surrender, but that would sacrifice our souls in order to save our lives. That's not an option. We could fight, but not all of us will die, and many of our children will grow up to live and be dishonored by the Romans, and more than dishonored, soiled by them. But we at Masada can do something special that will echo through the ages. We can take the sharpest razor we have, slice our carotid artery and our jugular vein, bleed out quick, and leave the Romans with nothing but our defiance and our corpses. The next morning, Roman combat veterans who had seen years of battle lost their lunch looking at the corpses of men, women, and children who had clearly killed each other and killed themselves. in what can only be described as an act of love, bizarre though it may seem. What horror! Yet Masada is holy ground. It's where officers of the Israeli Defense Force swear their oath of allegiance. It is where the state of Israel finds its heart. But that Jewish tradition is inherited by the Islamic traditions that came to dominate the rest of the Middle East. And the tradition is uncompromising. You will not compromise with evil. Are you so unfaithful to your God that you're willing to allow infidels, Satanists, and pagans to peacefully live across the river because of some artificial border? Are you willing to live in a society where evil is done without standing up against it? In Christianity, in the West, the fanatic can always be shamed by the moderate. In the life of Christ, you have a history of turn the other cheek. You have a willingness to endure suffering and death without raising the fist. The only time Jesus got angry in public was to overthrow the tables of the money changers, and no one died. It was a yell fest with some destroyed property. But at Masada, death before compromise. In the history of the Islamic world, a history begun by the Prophet Muhammad with the conquest of Arabia, with decisions made by the Prophet and his elite cadre, decisions that any ruler and general has to make in wartime and in conquest, a pattern is established of no compromise. Once we have victory, then perhaps we can be magnanimous to the kuffar, to the second-class citizen, to the non-Islamic citizen. But in the meantime, while the war is still on, we fight until we win. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to understand, not everyone's an American under the skin. In the war on terror, it is desirable on an instinctive level for us to seek peace and compromise and coexistence. It is absolutely alien to the traditions of the Islamic Middle East to seek that kind of balance when instead you can go for victory. Think hard on this and be well.